Welcome to Channel 17, the Town of Colonie Government Channel.
Welcome to The Money Factor. I'm Richard Naylor, your host. In the second quarter of 2005, the savings rate in this country turned negative. More people were spending more money than everybody was saving. What's going on, and how can we save more? Our guest today is Frank Marchesini from Edward Jones. Let's join him and work on answering some of these questions. Frank, thanks for joining us again.
Thank you for having me, Richard. Pleasure to be back.
Savings is, it's in a way, it's painful, but before we get into that, let's go into your background just a little bit. Could you tell us how you got into finance? And
Sure, I'd be happy to. I grew up here in Colonie, been a resident for my 46 years, been married for 20 years. I have a couple of kids that go to the local high school and middle school here. And professionally, I worked in manufacturing for the last 20 years. That's been a tough business locally, so 3 years ago I decided to join Edward Jones. I had a great opportunity, and here I am today.
great. Let's take a look at this savings rate. I've seen articles in the newspaper about how bad things are. Are things really as bad as the paper and the Department of Economics and the government paint it?
Well, that's a great question. It's probably the most significant issue that I face every day with my clients is saving for retirement. And there was a recent U.S. Census survey that stated that from Americans 50 to 65, 3 out of 4 have saved less than $40,000 each.
I think I saw that reported in the Times-Union.
Right. And out of that group, 50% of those folks will rely on their personal savings as their primary means for retirement. So that paints a pretty challenging picture for a lot of folks in the future, that they're going to be faced with some hard choices about what kind of retirement life they live.
Well, that sounds even bleaker than perhaps even if it's not a negative savings rate. If people only have that much money and they're depending on that to live, that's 1-2 years of life.
Well, what that forces them to do is make difficult choices about whether they can retire or not. Some may have to take on part-time work or just continue to work much longer than they plan to. And compounding that, people are living longer. So the nest egg has to be larger so that you don't outlive your savings. So there's a lot of there's a lot of challenges that people face in making sure that they do have a retirement that they're looking forward to.
I guess there are two series of questions that people have to answer, and I think the first question is really, should I save? Can I save? Why should I save? So that they actually do it. In other words, they really have an emotional understanding that allows them to make the adjustments. Why should they save?
Well, there's a lot of reasons, but primarily is you need to save because some of the life events that you face down the road, like retirement, like saving for college, or even saving for weddings, they're significant cost, and you need time to build up that asset so that you can work that into your budget. But also people need to save because of planning for emergencies, having some extra money in case something happens. I mean, we all have that happen. And there's also something emotional about saving as well, that you're achieving a goal, but in our society today, it's mostly about consumerism, and it's the messages we constantly get are about having things and spending money. So it is a conflict, so to speak.
I think our country is not known to be a country of savers.
Usually people don't get a lot of credit in the paper for being savers. It's about, again, spending and having nice things, and there's a balance. You can have nice things, but you also need to take care of and save for yourself first, and usually that's the toughest message for people to really understand.
I guess it's easy to put off.
Very easy, because it's important, but it's not urgent. That's the
And in our hierarchy of needs, eating and that kind of thing comes first. But then there's the real strong reality of eating when we're 65, 70, 75, and 80, and having a nice roof over our head then.
Absolutely,
So,
and that's
this time warp.
People don't, when you put dollars and cents to it, the average person is going to live 25 years past retirement. And if you think about just something as basic as eating, that's a tremendous sum of money that you're going to have to outlay during the course of your retirement. And it's got to come from somewhere. You're either working or you have an asset that's generating income to do that. So the toughest challenge is people just tend to put off today what, if it's not urgent, they don't do it.
And we can hope that we don't need to buy all these expensive drugs so that we can still eat.
Now, that's a whole other area, is medical costs and so forth. So absolutely.
So I guess what I'm hoping is to motivate everybody to really take a serious look at saving. Maybe some of the compounding issues is helpful. I mean, I heard when I was very, very young, if I just saved a little bit, it would mount up, because let's say I was 8 years old.
Right.
But I didn't do it.
Well, one of the things that, as an advisor, when I meet with young folks, I can show them that even if they put aside, a very nominal sum of money, that over time, that sum will generate tremendous returns just because of the time, the compounding. That's one asset we all have. It's just how much of it does each of us have. So, the message is really, you don't have to save a lot. Save what you can, and the earlier you do it, the more time that money has to generate and work for you.
Is there a benchmark percentage?
Usually, I usually say if you try to do 5%, everybody has their own budget. They have to look within. But the point is that you should think about setting a goal and what you want to accomplish. Do that first, and then take care of the other things in life. If you try to work retirement in as the last, there's usually nothing left. So that's why employer-sponsored plans are nice, because the money comes out pre-tax. You really, sometimes you don't even miss it, but it's a discipline that's there. It comes out. You don't have to make a conscious decision to save, and that's where people can be successful.
With things like college, you mentioned there are other reasons that people save, and colleges have gotten much more expensive. So how do you fit that in if you have a family? Well,
just like any other goal in life, I help my clients look at how old the kids are, try to anticipate what kind of an education they might desire, whether it's private, public, what the estimated costs are, and see if that can be built into a budget. And there are college savings accounts, 529 accounts that can be used. No one says that you have to do it all, but whatever you do, it'll be a tremendous benefit when your child is ready to start school.
And waiting is certainly
just makes it more difficult.
It makes it more difficult.
Right.
Now, people used to save for leaving something. Is that pretty much gone?
No, actually, that has taken a whole new light over the recent past 2 years, particularly because the state is trying to tighten down on Medicaid and having folks put their assets into a trust. They've made the rules more restrictive. So people have to start planning much further in advance if they want to use trusts to move assets to the next generation. So it's actually taken more of a priority in some cases.
So depending on how much equity you've built up or how large the estate is, you need to start that much earlier? Is that it?
It's not really a size. It's just a matter of whether your personal situation. If you want to try to shield assets or have assets protected in the event that you need some kind of care, there are certain legal ways to do that. But the state is trying to, and the federal government, they're trying to reduce how people use that so that, the ones that can afford it can actually pay. And, that's one of the fiscal challenges that the states and federal government have with Medicaid right now.
Right, because they have to pay for that also.
So, right, the whole estate planning is still an important issue.
There was a rule of thumb that people should try to save maybe a half year of their salary. How does that balance maybe with insurance for a catastrophic loss or risk?
Well, when I advise my clients on how much to save, I look at their personal situation in terms of, what kind of an income do they have? Is it very reliable? Is it cyclical based on, it could be a contractor, a realtor? So the predictability of their income, the more predictable, the less you need. And then you can also look at your expenses, how much debt you have, and from there you can tailor what type of a cushion. But I generally say 4 to 6 months.
So that's pretty standard then.
Right, right.
This is kind of a weird variation on the previous question. Sometimes it seems it's so difficult to save that people really can't save. Can you see that happening?
I see it happen all the time, and I think it really boils down to priorities in life. If you save for yourself first and you take a certain part of your income and put it aside and then take care of what's left, you can do it. There's really not an excuse that I can see where you don't put something aside. Now, how much do you put aside? That's an individual decision based on your budget. But to just say I can't do it is, I just believe that's an excuse that people use as a matter of convenience.
Let's say people decide they do want to save, and assuming that it's difficult because maybe they don't know how much they're spending on things. Well, that seems to point to the importance of developing a budget.
Absolutely. I mean, it's a discipline that businesses, successful businesses use. They're required to do that. And if you look at a household or an individual's personal financial situation, you should have a pretty solid idea of where you're spending your money. If you don't, then you're just leaving things to chance, so to speak, and you'll not achieve any kind of a goal. And budgeting is a discipline that will definitely help you if you put the time into it. It's not easy.
So it really does start with how much do I spend on food, how much can I afford for a mortgage, and that leads you then to still have that 5, 6, 7, 10%.
It very well could, because most people, after their hard fixed expenses, mortgage, utilities, things that are fixed that you really can't control by and large, there's a lot of discretionary expense out there, and that's where people usually end up, the money ends up going there, and those are the things that you really have to choose, whether you save for your retirement or you go out to eat 3 times a month, and you have to make choices in some cases. But you should always save for retirement first.
Sounds like good advice. How do you advise someone to start? Because let's say you're motivated, and we can all get motivated. We see something bad happen. Maybe we watch a movie. We see someone on TV or in the paper, and they're on the street. And we don't want to be that way when we're old, or we don't want to wonder how our spouse is going to survive. But maybe the first thing we do is a waste of our energy. What's the first thing to do? How can you get involved in savings in the most efficient way?
The first thing I would do is, if I was an employee, I would find out if I'm eligible for an employer-sponsored plan, a 401k, some type of a retirement plan. And if you are eligible, then I would just start. I'd pick a percent, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5%, and that money starts coming out, and you'd be surprised. Most cases, people don't miss it.
And that's pre?
It's pre-tax, exactly. And usually the tax benefit offsets the out-of-pocket costs. But I have found more people that have said, I can't do it, and then after they do it, they say, I don't even miss the money. So that would be the first thing. And if you're not eligible for any type of an employer-sponsored plan, then I consider going to set up an IRA, an individual retirement account, and then you can put money in as it comes available or do it systematically.
Something where you do it automatically.
X amount a month, right.
Yeah, and
right.
the automatic seems like that's really the important part, where you don't have to make an effort anymore.
That's right. Once you have to start making a decision whether to write that check or not, that's where problems can come in.
Leave it sit.
Right.
What about inflation? Should we be concerned about that when we save?
Absolutely. In fact, inflation is one of the most important negative forces that we face as we grow older, and that inflation basically robs us of our purchasing power. And what a dollar is worth today, that dollar won't be worth the same down the road. So what we have to do as advisors is to find ways to grow our clients' money, keeping the risk tolerance in mind, but keeping them ahead of inflation. And that is a paramount challenge we face. So absolutely, inflation is not to be ignored.
It seems like that almost works in such a way that you look in the future, you look at your life, and maybe you've saved X amount of money, and you think, okay, well, I can make 6% or 8% or something off that money. I feel fairly secure I can get something out of that. But then when you start spending that money, now you're getting towards predicting your death. You're saying, okay, if I take this much of my principal, I'm going to live this long? How do you deal with that kind of a dynamic?
That's a very great, interesting question, in that one of the most important decisions you make when you're ready to retire is that you do have a nest egg, certain amount of assets that can produce some level of income. And the question then is that income stream enough to support your lifestyle? Some people then start to take money out of the principal, and we usually recommend no more than 5%, because if you start taking more than that, then you'll risk really robbing the principal at a much more aggressive rate than what we're comfortable with. And
so that would be not in addition to taking the whatever the growth is, or the dividend, or the interest?
It could be a combination of the two, but I guess the point is the more you take out of the principal, the more risk you have in outliving your savings. And there's dynamics with the type of investments, the volatility. There's that whole distribution planning is a very important part of that retirement decision.
It seems to me, if I'm listening to that makes a strong case for leaving money to the next generation or to some charity, because otherwise you're really putting yourself at risk. Like, I'm not an insurance company looking at a lot of people. I'm one person.
Right.
Maybe on average I'm going to live 12 years, but what if I live 20 years?
Right. Well, that question really leads into the whole aspect of planning. You know, once you're basically retiring or planning for retirement, there's so many variables that enter in that, you know, we use some pretty powerful software that helps us run scenarios. You know, what if I want to leave this amount and retire or at a certain age? We can run those scenarios for our clients, and again, at that point in time, it's based on assumptions, but at least it allows us to look to see if there's major problems with the whole plan, and then we go back and continually monitor it and review and make changes. So, but it is a complex question, everything that you'd mentioned there.
Let's look at some of the options people have when they start. Obviously, the 401k could be at the top of the list.
Well, in terms of retirement, most people are eligible for some type of an employer-sponsored plan. So whether it's a 401k through a private corporation, educational folks use 403bs, New York State deferred comp, they're very, very similar. They should explore using that first, and then if they're not eligible for something through their employer, they should then seek something like an IRA.
What kind of companies would not have that option?
Companies have to choose. You know, one of the compelling reasons to do it, other than the fact that, you know, it's the right thing to do for people, is that it's a tremendous recruiting and retention tool. And people are becoming more mindful that they need to plan for their future. So if an employer is not offering a plan and someone can move to a company that does have one, that's a compelling reason to move. So it's a retention benefit, and people, employers look at it that way too. So there's a lot of positive, it's a win-win, so to speak.
So it sounds like employers can, without great difficulty, set one up.
Absolutely. The plans are becoming much more cost-effective. There are many providers out there, and where typically there were cost constraints for someone wanting to consider one, those barriers are really being removed almost daily. And even the traditional, small, mom and pop operation can have some type of a retirement vehicle that would meet their budget and have it managed by someone and get the proper investment advice. So even an individual can have their own employer-sponsored plan. So size really isn't really the constraint that it once was.
It seems like IRAs were the big thing when, 70s, 80s?
It's when they started, right.
They're not as big now? Are they more restrictions? Or what's going on with IRAs these days?
Well, I think IRAs are still a very popular vehicle, but what's come in place more recently is the Roth IRA, which uses after-tax dollars and allows the investments to grow, and then the outflows are completely tax-free. Those do have some income constraints, so not everyone can contribute, but those are becoming much more popular. But I still see a fair amount of IRAs out there, and in the absence of someone participating in their employer-sponsored plan, that's usually the next thing individuals do.
Right. So that can take many forms.
Sure. There's several different variations on how they work, tax implications, and contribution levels. So yes.
Are there any other major, I don't know if we should call them envelopes, but ways to save?
There's something called an annuity, which is a tax-deferred type of an investment.
Now, can that be equity as well?
Yeah, absolutely. It
Okay.
can be fixed. You can use some type of equity. And that is something that someone can use that doesn't have the contribution limits that an IRA has. Those are the primary ways. People use life insurance. There are several different ways you can save for the future, outside of just the basic, using a checking or a savings account as a base.
Right,
baseline.
because you want that to grow, and that's the main concern.
You want it to grow, but you also need to defer, or the taxes need to be deferred. So that's really the primary
to make it easier
benefit.
to grow.
Exactly.
So we've got different types of investments that people can make. So that's a secondary decision, right? Though first you've got to put some money aside.
Correct.
And now our second thing, bringing us to the second question. Okay, I'm saving. I have $40,000 in my checking account. I'm making 1%. What should I do?
Well, at that point, you should really understand what are you trying. What does that money need to do for you? Now, if it's for retirement, then clearly there should be an alternative considered based on your risk tolerance, using some form of stock, equity, mutual fund, something that's going to provide you with growth. Because again, your money has to grow at a rate higher than inflation. Otherwise, you're losing value. So that's where we would tailor a diversified, an asset allocation model based on your particular age, risk tolerance, when do you want to retire, and construct something that's personalized to meet your goals.
So something broad-based. Bonds, people talk about bonds, and I think we spoke about them on a previous show.
Right.
Any new thinking about them?
Bonds are excellent investments in terms of providing fixed income. You know what you're going to get. They also are in some cases, a means of guaranteeing your principal. But they're high quality investments. There's just no growth component. And typically what they do in an asset allocation model is to offset the volatility that stocks inherently provide.
But is that still working these days?
It does, absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely. We use bonds or bond funds in our portfolios to provide the benefits I just outlined.
How do interest rates, though, affect your decision whether you should be buying bonds? I remember municipal bonds were wonderful when we were going from a 14% interest rate down to almost nothing. The bond fund value was shooting up bigger than some of the stock funds in some cases. But now we don't know what interest rates are doing. I guess you're saying we need to look at bonds as simply income.
Well, just to expand on that point, again, we don't know where interest rates are going, and we recommend to our clients don't worry so much about trying to predict that. What you should be doing is looking at how to protect your fixed income component no matter where interest rates go. And we use a laddering strategy that looks at maturities, short-term, intermediate, and long, and have a proper diversification there so that you're mitigating the effects on your portfolio no matter where interest rates go.
Okay, so we know that people need to save. We know that they should save now, but when should they think about retirement?
Actually, there's really not a right age, but the sooner you start thinking about it, you're never too old to start thinking about it, or never too young.
It's kind of a reverse on the other one.
Yeah. You should really have an idea of where do you want to be? Where do you see yourself down the road?
How much do you like your job?
That could enter into it as well. But you have a vision of retirement. So you have this end picture in mind, and you're at a current point in your life. What do you have? Where am I right now? Where do I want to be? Then where I can help is how do you get there? How do you get to that vision? And we have definitely some great planning tools. We look to see whether you need to make any changes to achieve that goal. And then that plan has to be constantly monitored, reviewed annually to see how the assumptions are playing out. But you're never too young to start thinking about it. It becomes more critical the older you get because you have less time, but it's something that should really be on everybody's mind, is how to plan for that day inevitably when you don't work.
A flavor of that, I guess, is you project ahead.
Correct.
And you say, okay, I'm here and I have this much and this will do that. So you could either work longer or maybe you could downsize in the current phase and save more.
Absolutely.
Anybody done that?
I've had frank discussions with clients about if you want to have this amount, you have to be able to save this amount, and where's it going to come from?
Right. You can't borrow this car and
yeah, you can't. In some cases, you can't do it all. I mean, that's just the way it is. But at least I can help people make decisions when they have a chance to, have an impact down the road.
So hopefully they'll make that first decision and save, and then they'll have a chance
Right.
to make the second one and decide how.
The biggest thing I have when clients have come into my office is they've said, I didn't start soon enough. So didn't start early enough. So it's just, that's the message.
Well, that's a good message. And I do thank you again for coming back and
My
talking
pleasure.
about a serious issue.
Glad to be here. Thank you very much for having me, Richard.
And I want to thank everyone for watching. Welcome to the next show, and hope you have a good week. Take care.
Welcome to Channel 17, the Town of Colonie Government Channel.